All right, assalamu alaikum. If you're embarking upon a fat loss goal and you're not sure if your metabolism is fast enough to lose weight efficiently, I'm going to take you through 3 phases to lose weight, fix your metabolism, and then lose even more weight if you need to while eating more calories based on the same methods that I've used with hundreds of clients. And I even have some case studies in here to show proof, because you shouldn't just trust any random person online. You should only listen to somebody who has hundreds of client case studies of real examples of these principles working to ensure that it's not just theory, but it's actual practical application, which is exactly what I'm going to show you today, because alhamdulillah, I've worked with hundreds of clients already using these different phases. So there are 3 phases, and the first phase is actually the first phase I use with 80 to 90% of clients. Only really, I would say 10% of the time do we even need to use phase 2, but I'll tell you exactly what that is. So phase 1 is where we're using relatively low calories compared to what we would be using in phase 3 to get fat loss results. However, the way that I set up a diet is always sustainable. Okay, so I never want it to be where a client is hungry, starving, all that stuff. And this is a great starting point. Again, for most normal people, like 85 to 90% of people are able to start here, because even if you have an average metabolism, you're still able to lose fat with this phase without having to feel hungry or depriving yourself. And usually you'll be able to lose about 10 to 20% of your body fat, of your body weight, before you have to switch into phase 2. Okay, and later in this video, I'm going to go through full details, step-by-step case studies, everything. But I just want to introduce the phases now. Now, after you've hit a plateau with phase 1, or if you're one of that 10 to 15% of people who their metabolism is too slow to lose fat efficiently on a normal fat loss diet, then we would have to do metabolic optimization. So again, usually this is after you've hit a plateau, after you've already lost 10 to 20% of your body weight, or if you've just chronically over dieted in the past, if you've done a bunch of low carb diets or fasting in the past to slow down your metabolism, like I talk about in a lot of my other videos. If you have a slow metabolism as a result of any of these factors, or high cortisol due to chronic dieting and chronic stress, which also then affects your metabolism and digestion in a negative way, we have to do the metabolic optimization phase, or your hormones, your metabolism, and your digestion are not in the right place to be able to burn fat efficiently and easily. So again, full details coming in this video, inshallah. And then phase 3 is the fun part, okay? And this is where we're able to lose fat at the same rate, or almost the same rate as we did in phase 1, but on a surprisingly high amount of calories. And the thing is, even in phase 1, a lot of clients tell me they're very surprised that they get to eat that much food. You'll see that in a lot of my testimonials. But in high calorie fat loss, it's like just insane how much food you can actually eat while still losing fat because your metabolism is so fast. So phase 1, like I said, the average person can get results pretty easily without having to be hungry in this first phase. Because let's say that you're overeating, like a lot of people who need to lose weight, then simply shifting into this phase will put you in a calorie deficit. You'll lose, at least 1% of your body weight per week. You'll be good to go. But if you're under eating, believe it or not, because when I say relatively low calories, it's relatively low calories compared to phase 3, but it's still, much better protein and carbs, much higher protein and carbs than most other fat loss diets. And that stimulates your metabolism. If you watch my video on how to increase your metabolism, you would already know this. And so that actually, even for an undereater, can already fix whatever slow metabolism or metabolic adaptation has caused them to struggle with fat loss in the past. So again, the calorie and macro breakdown that you get in this phase, which is 40% protein, 40% carbs, 20% fats from, the right sources of lean proteins, complex carbs tailored to your body, your activity levels, your training, and then also the right, training protocol, does increase your metabolic output and calorie burn, and pretty much guarantees that you get into a significant enough deficit to lose 10 to 20% of your body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you're going to lose at least 20 pounds here. The average client loses about 26 pounds in 90 days if they're starting at 200 pounds and they're a man. Obviously, women can get results with this too, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, including the case study, is going to be men today. But you'll be able to lose a lot. And likewise, if you're starting at 300 pounds, you could lose closer to 20%. Like most people who start at 300 pounds lose about 50 pounds in 6 months before they hit a plateau and have to go into phase 2. And some of the people who have started in that 270 to 300 category could lose up to 75 pounds in some cases before they actually hit a plateau. But most people starting at 200 could lose at least 20 pounds, and most people starting at under 200, like let's say you're 180, you'll lose at least 15, usually 20 pounds in that 90-day time frame. So about 1% of your body weight per week. So the average male client, depending on where they're starting, again, this is going to depend on how many calories they typically eat. So I always look at what does a current typical day of eating look like for you. And even if it's very inconsistent, I want to know what does your typical weekly rhythm look like with your food. So I have a good idea of which foods to install and how many calories to put you at, okay? So usually most men end up being in that 1,800 to 2,200 calorie range, 45 grams of fat, 150 to 200 protein, 150 to 200 carbs in this low calorie fat loss. So like I said, it's much higher protein and carbs than your average, fat loss diet, where maybe on keto, they told you could only eat under 30 grams of carbs or whatever craziness that is not good for your metabolism, as I've talked about in many other videos, and we'll continue to talk about in other videos, because I don't want you guys suffering for these low carb diets that mess you up, especially if you're a high stress individual where you actually need carbs for cognitive performance and to lower your cortisol, your stress hormone. And then females end up being around 1500 to 1800, because females tend to have a smaller metabolism and also a smaller appetite. So usually, especially with lean proteins, complex carbs, that's super filling to where even this much food feels like too much for most women, yet they still lose weight, which is awesome, mashallah. And like I mentioned, 40% calories from protein, 40% complex carbs, 20% from healthy fats, and then we usually split this into 3 to 4 meals a day. We add a little bit of fiber to each meal as well, 1 to 2 snacks. And so that really helps to improve digestion, keep your blood sugar consistent, and obviously, lower your cortisol, all that stuff. And then we do strength training and steps, which I talk about specific how-to on that in other videos. And so again, that initially increases your metabolism, optimizes it, keeps it fast for at least 3 months before you would hit a plateau, and produces a deficit, okay? But that being said, once you do lose 10 to 20% of your body weight in 3 to 6 months while feeling good, not being hungry, having good energy and recovery, all that stuff, and, get that initial momentum where you feel happy that you've lost a good amount of weight and you look different, people are noticing with pretty, relatively minimal effort required, even after all that, you will hit a plateau, because after you've lost 10 to 20% of your body weight and been in a calorie deficit for, a period of 3 to 6 months, depending on your starting point, how fast your metabolism is, how much weight you have to lose, etc., your body is going to start kicking in with hunger hormones. So, for instance, when you've lost a certain amount of your body fat, your body has less leptin. Your fat cells produce leptin, which is a hormone that upregulates your metabolism and lowers your appetite and makes you feel full. So that's why, a lot of like 300-pound guys, 40% body fat plus, I could put them actually on a really low calorie diet and they don't even feel hungry. They still have good recovery. Like I've had guys starting at that 250 plus who, I gave them a certain amount of calories and then they actually ate less than what I gave them and they still felt fine, which is crazy. And I'm like, no, don't undereat. You're going to crash your metabolism, yet they still end up losing a good amount of weight before that actually happens, right? But still, if I give you a training plan, try not to undereat. Some people do struggle to eat as much food as I give them, which, like I'm saying, even in this relatively low calorie fat loss, you will still lose fat eating a really good amount of food. I mean, 200 grams of protein is a lot of food. 150 grams of complex carbs is a lot of food, especially when you're keeping the fats low, but you're still in a calorie deficit. So a lot of people undereat, but they still get results. But for the people who are starting leaner, like let's say you're starting at 15% body fat, you can't undereat. If you undereat, you're going to crash your metabolism very quickly, because the lower your body fat is, the less leptin you have, the more vulnerable you are to your metabolism crashing. So that's kind of the nuance I explain to clients, is the higher your body fat percentage is, the more you can get away with undereating. But the leaner you get, the more to undereating is high risk of crashing your metabolism, which if you're watching this right now and that's happened to you, you'll know exactly why the same low calorie diet that maybe, helped you lose a bunch of weight in the beginning is no longer working. Like, any super obese person can do keto and, their metabolism probably won't crash. And they just have so much leptin that, it doesn't crash as quickly. But if you're lean and you try to do keto, unless you're a genetic anomaly, you're probably going to crash your metabolism. Which is why some people come to me on keto with just a messed up metabolism, and we have to use carbs to re-stimulate and get their metabolism back up. But anyways, so essentially, once you hit a plateau with your metabolism, even losing weight in a healthy way, your hunger comes up, your results slow down, and this is why we have to go into phase 2 to speed your metabolism up after it's slowed down after 3 to 6 months. And I actually have a step-by-step example and case study of this once I go through the other 2 phases, so you can understand, how everything works around everything. Now, let's go into phase 2. So phase 2 is, when you hit that plateau, you keep your fats low and you slowly raise your calories using mostly complex carbs, but in many cases, we also increase protein a little bit. And we usually do this for about 4 to 6 weeks, but some people might do it for 8 to 12 weeks. It just depends on how long you need to get your metabolism fast, but usually 4 to 6 weeks is sufficient. Like I mentioned, 10 to 15% of people, they have to start in this phase, right? Like if somebody's been on keto for 10 years, they usually are going to have to start in this phase. I mean, we can test out phase 1 on them, and actually a lot of them do end up getting results anyways. But, occasionally you'll have somebody where their body just doesn't respond. And we were already suspicious that their body might not respond in that first phase 1, but that's fine. Phase 1 is, if you do phase 1 for 1 to 2 weeks and the results are not expected, which only happens really 10% of the time, we can always switch you into phase 2, no problem, fix your metabolism, and then go down and you'll be good to go. So there's no downside in starting in phase 1. You just have to start with it. 80 to 90% of people get results with it. 10 to 15, maybe 20% maximum of people need to switch into phase 2, but it's fine. Doing phase 1 for 1 to 2 weeks just gets you in the right habits, the right rhythm, where phase 2 is super easy in the first 1 to 2 weeks of phase 2, so you can easily transition into this phase. So this is where we ramp up carbs each week. So some people will only increase their carbs by 25 grams a week. Other people will increase by 50 grams a week. And some people who are super active, super athletic, the first week I might increase by 75 to 100 grams and then increase by 25 to 50 grams a week. Okay. And this is super effective because when we're using complex carbs, we're keeping the fats low, we're eating protein, we're strength training 3 to 5 days a week. We're, not going crazy with cardio or steps, but, obviously you're not only getting 2 to 3,000 steps a day, you're probably getting, 8 to 10,000, especially because this is going to boost your energy levels to where you're going to feel like walking. You're going to move around a lot more. This is going to be amazing. Your metabolism is going to skyrocket. And again, this helps you to get to a place where, ironically, I would say 20 to 30% of people in phase 2, even though we're up in their calories, their metabolism gets so fast that they actually end up losing weight. But 60 to 70% of the time, they just don't gain weight. They don't lose it either, but they feel better and better. Their energy levels are up. They feel like somebody put the batteries back in them after being on those chronic low-calorie diets. And so then their energy levels go up, performance in the gym, recovery goes up, but they don't gain weight, they don't lose weight. It just stays steady. That's about 60 to 70% of people, but 20 to 30% of people get very lucky and they actually lose weight throughout this process. They drop bloating, they drop water weight, they look leaner. They're like, wow, I can't believe I'm eating more and losing weight, which is awesome. Now, essentially, so once your energy levels and metabolism skyrocket, you feel amazing. And again, 20-30% of people get leaner despite eating more calories. A lot of people gain muscle throughout this period. The goal is to get your calories as high as possible. So let's say that you were cutting as a man on 1,800 to 2,200 calories or less. I mean, I would almost never put somebody below 1,800 calories unless they're like a relatively smaller man, like 120 to 150 pounds and like 5'2". That would be a case where maybe I'd put a man lower than 1,800, but most men, I mean, even guys who were 5'6" and under, starting at like 150 to 160 pounds, I've had them as low as only 1,800, not lower than that, and they still got great results. And then obviously if you're a bigger guy, very active, you'd probably be on the higher end of this even in phase 1. But most of these guys, we can reverse diet to 2,700 to 3,500 calories and in most cases 300 plus grams of carbs, which is crazy, and you won't gain any body fat. You just gain muscle and your maintenance calories become so high that really lines you up for phase 3 to be able to lose fat at a relatively fast rate in a relatively, small deficit and a relatively large amount of food. Okay. If a woman is dieting on 1,500, which I would almost never put a woman below 1,500 unless she's like 110 pounds or something like that, but usually 1,500 to 1,800 for most women in the 150 to 250 pound range is where I would have their calories. I mean, even a woman who's over 250 pounds, I would often just start them at 1,800 because the thing is, like, when you have that much body fat, you have a lot of leptin to where you could get away with a pretty big deficit and lose weight pretty quick. And especially when the macros are optimized 3 meals a day, 1 to 2 snacks, complex carbs and lean proteins, that's really good for your metabolism to where even though they're in a big deficit, their metabolism still improves, which is pretty crazy, subhanAllah, and then obviously with strength training. But in the reverse dieting phase, we usually only bring women to 1,800 to 2,400 because most women just have a smaller appetite, so it's pretty hard to eat more than that if the calories are clean. Like, obviously, if you were eating like, large oily pizzas, you could easily eat 3,000 calories in one meal. But when we're keeping fats low, 45 grams max, I mean, some men, I might bring them up to, 60 grams, especially if they're like a bigger guy, very active. But usually I like to keep fats at 45, which is a bit controversial. Some coaches say that's too low. You shouldn't go lower than 40 to 45 because at that point, you could start to get hormonal issues, hair loss issues with the lining of your stomach, which, healthy fats are essential for these functions, but you don't need that much essential fat. 45 grams a day. I've had guys' testosterone levels go up only eating 45 grams of fat a day versus in the past they were on keto eating a bunch of avocados, eating 90 to 120 grams of fat a day, thinking it was boosting their test. No, that was just making you fat, and being obese lowers your test by 20 to 30% versus being lean increases your test by 20 to 30%. So anyways, so we'll get up to this high amount of calories and then we can cut very easily. So I'll show you another example of that. So now the fun part comes. So imagine, if you're eating 3,000 calories and you're not gaining any weight, or you just start doing a small amount of cardio or a small deficit. So if you're a man eating 3,000, you would just have to go down to 2,700 to 2,500. For a woman eating 2,400, she would just have to go down to 2,100 to 1,800. And now you're losing fat on a much higher amount of calories relative to your appetite. So you're eating a ton of food, you're losing a pound of fat a week, which is what a 500 calorie deficit is. Like daily deficit of 500 times 7 days a week, 3,500, that's 1 pound of fat. You feel amazing, high energy, you get to eat a lot. People think you have just good genetics, but in reality, you may have average genetics or even bad genetics, but you just intentionally built your metabolism to the point where you can lose a bunch of weight. So this is what's super fun, and it makes maintenance really easy. Let's say that you don't need to lose more weight. Okay, keep eating 3,000. You'll maintain on that, And we could even start increasing your dietary fats and bringing the carbs down to maybe 250, bring the fats up to 60 to 75, and you can even maintain even eating relatively higher fats. Now, I usually don't want people eating more than, 75 grams of fat, even for a really big guy, because, it's just too much, even after the, high calorie fat loss phase. You can still have a cheat meal, and in your cheat meal, if you eat a bunch of lamb chops, that's 100 grams of fat in one sitting. But other than the cheat meal, I don't like to have people go too high in fats, and I usually like to keep it as low as possible because it just allows you to eat more carbs, and carbs are more satiating. Carbs have less calories per gram. So if you've seen that in any of my other videos, and I'll do more videos on that too, inshallah. So carbs are just so superior. They're better, and carbs stimulate your metabolism more than fats. Carbs give you better muscular fullness, pump, recovery. The insulin spike in a low-fat environment with a lot of amino acids due to having high proteins in your diet can really help you to just recover and build muscle faster and just keep your metabolism sky high. And this is why all the top athletes in the world use this particular strategy, and only very rare anomalies use like a keto or high-fat approach. It's very rare. It's only genetic anomalies. 99% of people do better on low-fat, high carbs, and I'll do more videos on that in the future, inshallah. But anyways, so now you can keep weight off long term. And now, before I go into some case studies, I do want to mention that I have like in-depth case studies, and we're going to be putting out more and more of them, but I have the whole testimonials on my channel. I'm going to show a few case studies for each of the phases in the video, so you can see exactly how the phases work. But there are also 3 ways that you can get additional help with this, right? We have 3 options. One is paid, 2 are free. Number 1, paid, right? You can book a complimentary consultation where my team and I are going to talk through your fitness journey, see which phase you need to start with, and what numbers you need to start with, and what kind of nutrition plan you're going to need to start with, as well as training plan, everything. And based on the consultation, we can look whether it's a good fit for us to work together or for you to keep trying on your own. But obviously, in most cases, as long as the person is committed, it's better for us to work together. So that's something that we can discuss. I'll put a link in the description. And then if you want to go through like examples of clients who are astounded they could eat so much food and lose weight, I'll attach at the end of this video a link to the testimonial playlist. And then I also have a free fat loss mini course. Let's say you're new to my content and you don't feel comfortable booking a consultation yet, because you literally just discovered me. Maybe this is the first or second video you're seeing from me, but you want to go through more and maybe start experimenting with this method to see if it actually works, which it does, but I know you need to see it for yourself first. Even after I show you the case studies, no problem. I got a free mini course that goes deeper into the science, practical application, everything, that I'll link at the end of this as well, inshallah. So let's go into the case studies for each phase. So this is one of my best transformations, and I wish you guys could see under the belly button, but obviously in the Maliki school of thought, it's wherever the pants naturally sit. But in the Shafi, Hanbali, and Hanafi, you got to cover from under the belly button. So out of respect for the 75% of the madhabs, we always cover below the belly button. But you can see this right here is 32.6 pounds difference. Okay, subhanallah, mashallah, Allahumma barik. This is Farhad. He started at over 20% body fat, and now he's down to 9-10% body fat. And I wish you guys could see how shredded he is here, and how, no disrespect to him before, but how much belly fat he had here, because this photos don't even do it justice. So, mashallah, he's lost a lot of weight. And mashallah, he's been able to do this for 6 months in a relatively low-calorie fat loss phase, okay? So what I did was I took an inventory of all the foods he ate on a daily basis, and I shifted to meal plan 1 example. Oh, it looks like I was actually going to show his meal plan today too. So we can dive into that, right? So I just took out a couple things just to kind of show what his meal plan looks like. So he plays basketball a lot, so I had a kind of variable calorie structure for him. If it's a day where he's not working out and he's not playing basketball, 1,800. If it's a day where he's only playing basketball or only lifting, 2,000. And up to 2,100 to even 2,200 if it's a day where he does both basketball and lifting. Keeping the fats nice and low, 40 to 45 grams. His carbs on like a 1,800 day where he's not doing anything is only 120 to 150. Because I know that his carbs are going to be much higher on the other days. So, for instance, I told him add 50 grams of carbs if you have either a lift or a basketball session. So that's 170 to 200. And then on the days where he does both, I actually had him up to 250 at one point. So we actually upped his carbs over time. This was just his initial meal plan. Now, prior to this, he was eating 3 to 4 meals a day: steak, cheeseburgers, egg and cheese with mission wraps, chicken sausage, ground beef with mission wraps, potatoes, tuna or turkey with mission wraps. So, it wasn't the worst diet in the world, but it had a little bit too much, sugar and fat in it. And, 3 to 4 meals is good, but he actually used to do like 3-day water fast, which is how he lost weight before, which, wasn't good for his metabolism or digestion. So we put him on this 3 meals a day and gave him some great options and really set him up for success with, a lot of great options, and just really structured things in a way that he was easily able to follow. And then between all this, following these macros and this sort of meal split, he was able to get amazing results. And I'm just going to reset the slideshow here. Sorry for the tech issues. But anyways, so as you can see, that was the exact meal plan with the variables for like, a lifting day versus a lifting and basketball day versus a basketball only day that really made the biggest difference. And so we basically rode this exact rhythm with one cheat meal a week for 6 months until his results started to slow down. And only at the 6 month mark, which is, the upper end of what I typically see for people, lasting on this type of diet before they start to get hungry and the results slow down. Right at the end of 6 months, or towards the end of 6 months, that's when he started to see that instead of losing 2 to 3 pounds a week like he was here, he was only losing like 1 pound a week, and it became a lot harder. And he also started to become a bit hungrier, to where for the first time in the diet, 6 months in, he started to feel a bit hungry, which is why we then shift to metabolic optimization phase. So that's the phase we're shifting to with him right now. There's actually a fresh testimonial right here. I haven't even done his interview yet, but that'll be posted soon, inshallah. But here's a brother who we have an interview with and who we've done all these phases with. So this was actually phase 1 right here, okay? So I'm going to open all these texts right here, right? So this was before our program, where he was actually under eating and his macros were way off. So what he said on his intake form was he would usually have a protein shake in the morning. He would skip lunch, not good for your metabolism, but snack throughout the day. Tiny piece of chocolate, protein bar, half a chocolate biscuit, so not the best sources of food. Dinner, depends how tired he is, sometimes chicken with a marinade, taco style, sometimes a quick shawarma. If they're tired, they order out. Fried chicken sandwiches, pizza, shawarma, rice platters, etc. So I basically calculated this where on some days he might have been eating, as little as 1,200 calories, not enough protein, a very small amount of carbs and fats, very much under eating with a crashed and slowed metabolism. You can see he was bloated. Again, these photos don't always do it justice because we have to cover the aura, but like he was crazy shredded here, like V lines and everything, versus here he had a big tubby belly. And he's a relatively shorter guy. This was only 160. This right here is 119. And then this is after phase 2. You can see he stayed lean while gaining a ton of muscle. He looked way thicker. The arm veins are starting to pop even more. Things are bulging. He's getting absolutely jacked. And between this photo and this photo, I believe he gained 15 plus pounds while eating way more of just lean tissue. Barely gained any fat. Kept his abs, stayed lean, even though we bulked him back up and got him eating 2,700 to 3,000 calories a day. So on the left, he was under eating. Metabolism wasn't optimal. We put him straight into phase 1. He was able to do phase 1 for 9 months. This is a 9-month transformation, 41 pounds in 9 months. And that was after we increased his calories to about 1,800, or 1,600 to 1,800, but with consistent macros, 150 plus protein, 150 carbs, 45 fat, weekly cheat meal, 3 times a week lifting, 10K daily step average, okay? Again, 41 pounds in 9 months, mashallah, 9% body fat, and that was phase 1. Now, phase 1, obviously, 119, very sustainable. He managed to hold it for 9 months, right? He did this calorie deficit for 9 months, which is a testament to how sustainable it is, because, typically, and even then, like, typically people only last 3 to 6 months. So he, above average, right? He was able to go 9 months before his body started fighting the process and got down to 9% body fat, which is, above typical. His metabolism doesn't slow down by much and his appetite didn't spike by much, but eventually got to a point where he hit a plateau around here, and that's when we started to reverse him back up into phase 2. So now so as you can see, even though we had him eating more already in phase 1 because he was more of an undereater as opposed to Farhad was a bit more of an overeater, we got him to the point where he lost a lot of fat eating more than what he was before, but it was still relatively low calorie, right? So, it was more than 10 times his body weight, but it was about, 10 to 12 times his body weight, or 10 to 11 times his body weight, which is still relatively low. Like, ideally, we want to get you to the point where you can even eat 14 to 15 times your body weight and maintain to where, at 12 to 14 times your body weight, you're in a good weight loss phase, or even at 14 times your body weight, but just adding in a bit of cardio, you're able to eat a lot of food and lose fat pretty consistently. So, what we did was we increased his calories, and now he's eating 2,700 plus calories. He's not smiling here, not because he's not happy. He's happy, mashallah. He's just a very stoic guy. But he maintained his low body fat using phase 2 and gained a lot of muscle and strength. So this is an example of phase 2. Now, I actually am going to use myself for an example of a crazy example of phase 3. Now, I've had some clients get crazy results like this, but I want to show you that I practice what I preach as well. And so the first one was actually back in college, which is even more extreme than, what I did in my late 20s to early 30s. But basically, right here, I was 228 pounds, bulked up, eating 6,000 calories a day. Not the cleanest calories, because back then, this is, 10 years ago, right? So back then, I didn't really understand that eating too much fat was not necessarily good for you, but just from the carbs alone and how active I was and how fast I got my metabolism trying to bulk up on 6,000 calories a day, when I switched to 3,500 calories and up my cardio, I lost 28 pounds in 8 weeks, which is crazy, right? So that 6,000 calorie 8 week bulk, where I didn't start at 6,000, I probably started about 3,500 to 4,000, but I just kept going up, and my metabolism kept upregulating and upregulating because that's how this stuff works in phase 2. I got to the point where I was eating 450 grams plus of carbs a day. I was probably eating 100 grams of fat a day, which I would not recommend. I probably could have stayed leaner in this bulk if I kept my fats at 45, and my protein was definitely like at least 200 to 300 a day at that point, and it was absolutely crazy. Now, in another case, here is when I got down to 7% body fat, so actually in my late 20s, after a long 3,000 to 4,000 calorie bulk, okay? So in this photo, I was eating about 4,000 calories a day. I did get a bit fat. My fat intake got a bit high, but my body wasn't as forgiving in my late 20s as it was in my early 20s. And then here, I was eating 2,500 to 2,700. So you can see, this is an example of phase 3 where I'm eating an amount of food that for most people would be a weight gain phase, yet it was a weight loss phase for me, even, as a dad and busy professional / business owner in my late 20s here. And then, my metabolism has functioned the same as it does here into my 30s as well. Because again, when you get your metabolism optimized with phase 2, you can cut on much higher calories in phase 3. So both of these are examples of phase 3. This one almost doesn't count because it's college. I mean, your metabolism's superhuman at that point. I could have done probably even keto at this point. My metabolism wouldn't have slowed down as much, but the carbs did definitely keep it fast. But here, again, I was eating carbs. I was having, plenty of cheat meals, getting absolutely shredded. Output was high. I was doing a lot of boxing as well, which I had plenty of energy for because I was eating lots of carbs. You can see there's muscular fullness. There's not a lot of bloating because, again, my carbs are high, which facilitates digestion, improves your serotonin, etc. And that's the greatest part and the fun part about high flux cutting. So now I'm 31 years old, so this is 2 years after this photo, and I typically eat 3,000 to 3,500 calories when I'm in a maintenance phase. And alhamdulillah, over the last few years, really over the last 3 years, my coaching business has really dramatically scaled up. But I've been doing this for 10 years now as a personal trainer, and the last 6 years online. And I've had hundreds of clients, and ever since the beginning, I was always of the mindset, I don't want you having to deprive yourself on 1,200 calories a day just to lose weight. My whole principle is I always want people to lose fat eating more calories than they ever thought was possible because we build muscle, because we build your metabolism. And so, again, what I'm going to do is at the end of this video, actually, I'm going to put the playlist links in the description. I'm going to attach my 6 fat loss plateau solutions video at the end up above. And so basically what I want you to do is if you're interested in coaching, you can get more info about that below in the links, as well as, the testimonials and the fat loss mini course. But if you want to see my 6 plateau breakers to break through your fat loss plateau, I'll attach that in the end screen here. So I'll see you in the next video. Tap here or both. I'll see you in the next video. And any questions you have, let me know in the comments as well. Assalamu alaikum.